town residents options for opting out of having their doors knocked on. The agenda tonight is mostly fairly straightforward housekeeping type of items, with the one exception that we do have a presentation tonight by New York Football Club, the purchasers or almost purchasers of the Stedge property, which we're really excited about, and we welcome you guys to our meeting tonight. I had the chance to meet with Paul and Brian earlier today, and I look forward to meeting the rest of your team and ultimately having this great soccer operation in the town of Orangetown. So congratulations on that. Why don't we get started? Charlie, are you going to take attendance? Sure. Great. So we'll start the meeting officially now that Charlie's here, and then we'll move on to your presentation, which will be great. And just as a reminder, we are on television tonight, just like we are for all town board meetings, and the video will get posted to YouTube later. If anybody misses the meeting, they can always go back and check it that way. Thanks, Charlie.
As always, this is the town of Orangetown, and welcome to the meeting tonight. This is a workshop meeting, and we on a roll call, Councilman Troy. Present. Councilman Divany. Here. Councilman Valentine. Here. Councilman Batari. Here. Supervisor Stewart.
Here. Thanks.
And I would ask Jeff, please start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Jeff. So over to New York Football Club. Who's going to represent?
Brian Quinn.
How you doing, Brian? Nice to see you twice in one day.
And I'll start the presentation, but we do have other folks here who will introduce themselves, and we'll have more to say and explain to you what it is we're proposing to do. I'm here tonight. I'm an attorney, of course. I'm representing the New York City Football Club, which, if you don't know, is in the highest professional American football, I should say, soccer league, but it's, the rest of the world knows it as football. And they are in their second year of operation. They started last year. I was flipping through my channels last night and came to the Yes Network, and there they were playing the Chicago Fire. The first game, and they won the game 4-2. So,
thanks.
They play their home games at Yankee Stadium. However, they are looking for a home to have their training facility. They currently are renting space up at SUNY Purchase, which is a little further away, and it's a limited time lease, and so they are looking for a permanent home, and they are very interested in a piece of property right here in Orangetown. And it is, of course, it's been referred to over the years as the Stedge property. This is a piece of property that was purchased by the town of Orangetown from the state of New York as part of the Rockland Psych property, and a number of years ago, Stedge came forward, purchased the property from the town, wanted to put in a public recreation facility. It was going to be a large facility. They envisioned it generating a lot of traffic. And I think by the time they got all their approvals, I think they realized that economically it was going to be difficult to make that work. And so it was never built. And as I understand it, all of the approvals have expired. I'd like now to introduce some folks from the New York City Football Club, and then I'll come back with Bruce DiPaolo, who's an attorney also working with the New York City Football Club. We'll give you the lawyer speak of why we're here and what we're hoping that you'll approve for us. So I'll start out. Want to come up and introduce yourself?
Good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm John Patrikoff. I'm the president of the New York City Football Club. I'm going to give you a brief overview of our club, and then I'm going to bring up Tony Lynn, who's my colleague, and he's going to talk a little bit more specifically about the project we have in mind. So the New York City Football Club was launched in 2013 as the 20th Major League Soccer club. We're proud to be the first MLS team based in New York City. We are formed by a joint venture between Manchester City Football Club and the New York Yankees, and play our home matches at Yankee Stadium. We have about 20,000 season ticket holders. Season actually has just started, and our first home match will be this coming Sunday. And we had about a 29,000 person average attendance at home last season. We've also provided many ticket donations and other activities to local community groups at Yankee Stadium. Currently, the training facility is at SUNY Purchase, and as you heard, that is under a temporary arrangement, and so we're very excited about the opportunity potentially to have a permanent facility here, and for our players and for our coaches to be working out of. So I'm going to bring up Tony Lynn, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the project. Happy to answer questions, of course, if anybody has any.
Hi, good evening. Nice to see you all. I'm the head of infrastructure for New York City Football Club. A bit of an outline, you've all got the plan in front of you, so if you just refer to the plan at the bottom of the page, and really this is an elite athlete training facility for our first team, who will be based at this facility full time. They operate 7 days a week in and around games throughout the season. The facility will consist of a 25,000 square foot single story building, which will consist of training facilities, locker rooms, medical and sports science, and catering provision, with accommodation for the administration and direct support staff. There'll be an additional 5,000 square foot building, which will be the grounds maintenance buildings to support the field operation and any other maintenance and day-to-day operational requirements of the site. You'll notice then the grass tablet, that is for the soccer people in the room, which is a field and a half. So size-wise, that's 380 by 380 feet, and that'll be a fenced-in field which will not be floodlit or have any sort of microphones or projectors. So it's a standalone field which will be natural turf with a perimeter around it for maintenance and storage reasons. You'll notice then that there's the car park, which will be up to 100 car parking bays for players and staff. And that really is what our facility will consist of. Has anyone got any questions, or is that clear what we're proposing in terms of physically building the facility on the site?
It's perfectly clear.
Okay,
We're looking forward to you coming in.
great, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Perfectly clear. It looks like a fabulous proposal, very low impact, and it's about time that something happened with the Stedge property. I think I speak for the whole town board and the town, saying that it's exciting to see an investment taking place after so many years of it lying vacant.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
And I think what you might want to mention, since it's a public meeting, is the fact that this is a for-profit operation, correct?
Correct.
They're going to pay taxes.
They pay taxes.
I mean, I'd like to thank you guys for putting the effort in. I mean, this has been going on for 2 years. I've met with Tony 3-4 times, and, you know, I've expressed my interest and the interest of the town to get them, Manchester City, the New York Football Club, the Yankees to be part of our town. I think it's a great thing. I mean, I'm a soccer fan, and, you know, I was watching Man City last night on the television, and I think it's great. We have so many kids who enjoy the sport. It's finally moving forward with the site, and I just think it's going to be an amazing opportunity for New York Football Club. I think it's an amazing opportunity for the town of Orangetown, and I can't wait until you guys get into the town and start, you know, practicing at your new facility. Thanks a lot, guys, and best of luck.
Thank you.
I guess that brings us to our next topic, which is there's material that the town board needs to review for our action, and then, of course, the planning board is where you go for any of the site planning stuff. But I don't know, John, I'm sure we'll be back in a minute, but do you want to start sort of laying out what you see as what actions by the town board are foreseeable in this situation?
If we could. Bruce DePaula from Paul Hastings, outside transactional counsel for New York City Football Club. So a bit about where we are in the process. We are holders of an option to purchase the property. That option is yet to be exercised. We're in the middle, toward the end stages of our diligence of the property, including site conditions, legal conditions, zoning, as well as infrastructure costs and opportunities at this site. During the course of our diligence, a couple of things have come to light, and we're here to ask for the town council's help on those. So the first two things, in 2005 and 2007, there were declarations recorded against the Stedge property, if we can call it that for ease of reference. I think if we look at those are numbers 1 and 2 in the little booklet I handed out. We think that none of those conditions are particularly applicable to our much reduced size and use and parking/traffic conditions. So we would ask that the conditions in each of those declarations be terminated incident to our taking title to the property. The second things that came up were two agreements that were entered into between the town and the current owner of the property. So those are items 3 and 4 in the booklet I handed to you. One is the option contract between the town and Stedge, which dealt with Stedge's project, which was a ambitious indoor recreational multi-purpose facility that would draw at various times hundreds of cars and people at various times, would largely cover the entire site with impermeable parking and buildings. And if you look at the site plan that Tony referred to and that we handed out, the proposed use is a grass tablet and a relatively modest building and parking with a lot of open space and a lot of water permeability. And what we're asking with respect to the two agreements that are not the recorded declarations, we just ask for some confirmation, to the extent it's possible, that we, who are not party to either of those agreements, would not be subject to the terms on which Stedge had their site plan approved and the terms on which they agreed to move forward with their project. In essence, we're asking that when we come to the planning board, that the project, the site plan, the proposed use is reviewed on its own, independent from any prior agreements and independent from any uses and development of adjacent lots in the vicinity. We understand that there's a site plan approval process. We're happy to go through that if and when we acquire the property, and we will certainly abide by the conditions that are imposed. We're just asking for a sort of a fresh de novo review of the site plan when we come to the planning board, without the pre-accepted, preconceived ideas that are in what I'll call the infrastructure agreement and the prior option contract. The last thing is, we understand that there is some interest on the town's part in having the owner of this site release the town from the non-compete that prohibits the town from competing with developing or operating another indoor recreational facility. To the extent, and when we acquire this property, that there's no issue at all with us releasing that. That's not in our interest, and we're certainly happy to have the town do anything it likes with the other properties that it owns. And the last thing is, if you look at number, I think it's 6 in the handout, there was a letter given to Stedge a while back that said, notwithstanding what's in the deed from New York State to town of Orangetown, requiring that 216 acres of the larger site be devoted to recreational and municipal use, that the Stedge site would not be counted toward that 216 acres. So as a final matter, we would ask that that same confirmation be extended to us as the new owners of that site. So at this point, happy to answer any questions or discuss next steps to walk through on a more detailed basis the declarations or the agreements. But I just ask that we can address that. And we have very short time left on our option contract. We need to make a decision relatively quickly. And it's very helpful to us to have this decision today or shortly hereafter, because the cost of the infrastructure improvements, among which are adding a traffic light at the corner of Old Orangeburg Road and the adjacent road, widening Old Orangeburg Road of an indeterminate width, adding an access road, and a couple more minor items, cost, by our estimation, approximately $2.5 million. And that's not within the budget that we have allocated for the project. So it would be a big help toward getting our budget in line with the actual costs if we could be fairly comfortable that we wouldn't be asked to commit to do these infrastructure improvements unless they or other separate, presumably lesser conditions are imposed by the planning board as part of a fresh, independent review of the site plan when we came to them.
I went to one of the presentations by the New York Football Club, and I thought it was very enlightening. And for somebody, I was involved with the Stedge proposal, which I thought would happen and never happened. And I sat there through a lot of painful negotiations with the attorneys on both sides. And some of the agreements I didn't agree to, but it didn't matter because I was not one of the attorneys. But as far as I'm concerned, almost all the things you just stated, and I said this at the meeting we had prior, that I think they're all doable, and I think it's in the interest of the town to do these, because this is a far different use of the property than what was planned with the 250,000 square foot recreational area. The other part to that, in terms of the parking lot, the commitment to that, part of that was tied into a town swimming pool, all right, and there was going to be definitely an impact in terms of drainage with that particular facility. You will not have that with what you're planning. So I'm in favor of that. Easy for me to say, I'm not the attorney. So I'm turning to our attorney, John, and see what he has to say. But I would say one thing, all right? In terms of the widening of the road, to me, in terms of what the use you're using it for, it's easy again for me to say I don't see that as part of it. One way or another, we need a traffic light there, and that's something you can do something towards that. That would be a great thing, because it's a very tough intersection. It really is, in terms of people coming in and out of there. And again, it was more based on the higher utilization, for the recreational facility than what you're having. So I don't know if it's really fair to tie you into that, but look, I won't give you a free pass on that one. That can be figured out. But John, what has to be done in terms of those provisions by the town board before we get to the planning board? And I'm looking for your guidance, John, as usual.
Well, certain of the covenants and obligations were imposed and survived the contract closing. Typically, what happens in a real estate transaction is there are obligations in the contract, and when the deed is passed, those obligations, the contractual obligations, no longer continue unless they survive. Now, there are certain contractual obligations that survived closing. We're going to have to look at those. We don't have the handout that you were referring to with the, maybe we have one. Okay. So we'll have to go through those. I don't think that there was anything that the board would necessarily, want to burden you guys with. Entirely different type of operation, different infrastructure burden. There were a couple of items, you know, alcohol, firearms, those things, that may, the board may look at. We've had some discussions, you know, it's not going to be a public facility, it's not going to be a public, you know, bar. Not that anybody opposes that. But, you know, those things, there may be limitations or language that, you know, the board might want to modify, but continue to some extent, maybe. We're very much interested in having the declaration that restricts the town's use of the other lands, having that lifted. And certainly there is, in consideration of that, there are other obligations that the town board, I think, would likely, you know, lift in to your benefit. I don't think there is much that's problematic, with the possible exception of the infrastructure improvements. Now, when you speak of relief, Dennis mentions the traffic light. The traffic light is meaningful. It's meaningful. It's more meaningful, obviously, when there was the proposal from Stedge, the magnitude of that use. You don't approach that, but nevertheless, it's a narrow road there, and the traffic light has always been, you know, something that the town has been interested in, and the county. It's a county road, right?
It's a county road. The
county.
has not been interested in it. The county hasn't done anything.
I'd just like to point out, sorry to cut you off, Mr. Edwards, but our anticipated traffic volume is approximately 20 cars between 9 and 10 a.m. Monday to Friday, another 20 cars arriving between 10 and 11 a.m. 20 of those cars would be leaving between 1 and 2 p.m., and the other 20 cars would be leaving between 5 and 6 p.m. That's the total traffic impact of the proposed facility. So when we look at that, that impact, if it even is an impact on the existing traffic through those areas, it doesn't seem that that would justify widening of a road or adding a traffic light. So as we look through the record, clearly, for reasons that aren't that clear from the record that's available to us, at some point, the burden of executing those infrastructure improvements shifted from the town with contribution to Stedge. I think it seems likely that that was just a timing thing where the town wasn't prepared to commit to do those, and Stedge offered to do it. We're not looking for a free pass at all. What we're looking for is a fresh, new, unburdened look at the site plan, the proposed use, the traffic additions in the context of our proposed development and our proposed use, independent of any prior agreements and any other users in the area. So if we were to go to the planning board, and the planning board, which I'm sure will act in a reasonable manner, determined that certain conditions were appropriate for our site and our proposal and our use, we'd be happy to, you know, attend to those.
I think really what we've got here is you know, there was a very simple question: what do you want this board to do? And this board has jurisdiction with respect to the declarations, the recorded covenants that run with the land. We'd like to know that we're going to get a fresh look, a clean slate, starting with the planning board, and really those decisions about traffic, drainage, you know, intensity of usage are all within the jurisdiction of the planning board. That would be all part of their SECRA review, the State Environmental Quality Review Act. They are presumably going to be the lead agency. They're the ones who will make that decision. We just want to know that we'll be able to go in there and they will look at this project fresh and new And because it's considerably different from what was previously approved, Forced Edge, with all of those additional conditions that were required. There was a traffic study that was done. It was determined that this would be needed. We presume we will have another traffic study, and I think it's going to show something substantially different. But ultimately, that decision will lie with the planning board.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I just have a legal question it's a process question. Is it true, as I'm thinking is being implied here, that the declarations here can be vacated by a resolution of the town board, or are there other steps that are, these things, shared parking, shared driveway, public access,
I mean,
rules about firearms and advertising, all these things that relate to
the
statute.
public access.
Can you just do a resolution and say, forget about that stuff, or is there
Some of the things, some of the declarations were there because they were gonna put a community pool in, so there would be public access. Some of the declarations were done because of the number of people that were anticipated going to this site. I mean, the bottom line is, we're talking 11 years later. We're talking nothing has been built. And nothing will be built if we don't try to act to get Man City on this property. And we also have a restrictive covenant that was signed as part of this deal where the town can't develop any other of that RPC property for commercial development. So we're gonna have Man City, New York Football Club, the New York Yankees in the town of Orangetown. We're gonna get rid of the restrictive covenant. And, I think it's great. This deal was made in 2005 when no one saw the housing market collapse, the rates go through the roof. No one saw that. It hasn't been built. The Hovanian property didn't get off the ground. We have only one thing that's gone at RPC, that's OMM. We're being given a second chance to do this. Everyone talks about clean ratables, soccer players playing soccer in a professional sports league. It brings prestige to the town. It's a clean ratable. I think we should do everything in our power to get them to come here.
I think it was well said. So, my
agree
question,
with-
I just want to answer the question I asked, which is a legal question, which is, what is the town board action to deal with these restrictions? Is it
Back to John, it goes back to my original
is
question.
it a resolution saying these things are?
Can we do that as a resolution here, or does it go to the planning board, and the planning board has to figure out whether those covenants go in or not?
No.
I would say it's the town board.
It's the town board, and Brian and I have had some discussions. I think ultimately, you guys have to be comfortable from your side of the table in the purchase that what the board agrees to do is legal, because ultimately, you may suffer the consequences. So, Brian and I discussed whether any of the covenants, any of the restrictions, because they were made in the context of a contract that was subject to permissive referendum, whether lifting those would be subject to permissive referendum. I have my view. We've discussed it. You have to be comfortable that it's not, or you have to say, we're not comfortable, we'd like to deal with the matter in the context of a resolution subject to permissive referendum, and you have the 30-day waiting period, and if somebody carries a petition, which is not likely, but, it is a risk. So I think you can lift the restrictions by resolution. You can do that. Now, let's get back to the one, because I have no dog in the fight, but you have to understand, and they should understand.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. In terms of the road widening and the traffic signal, when you speak of going to the planning board and the planning board taking a fresh look, not burdened by an agreement, you may be comfortable with that. And you may be comfortable with that based on the traffic volumes, the nature of the use, and a belief that they should not bear those costs, or alternatively, because there's an alternative, share in those costs. That may be true. And when you relieve them of that obligation, they go to the planning board, and those are off-site improvements, which are going to be difficult to impose in fairness, if you will, based upon what they know they will show to the planning board. Maybe the town shouldn't burden a user with those off-site improvements. But here's the rub. When you sold to Stedge, you bargained that. It wasn't that you couldn't impose on Stedge the obligation to off-site improvements. You were selling land, and it was part of the bargain. So, whether it's fair or not fair to impose all or a portion of those obligations on the purchaser, it was bargained for. Can you do it? You can. Should you do it? That's entirely up to you. Should they share in it? Because remember, you have the lot next door that eventually is going to be sold. Now, eventually, in RPC speak, it could be in a millennium. Nevertheless, there is there's another potential user who, whoever it may be, may impose a greater burden, perhaps should share in those improvements to a much greater extent. But you can say, as an alternative, we'll talk about sharing. When you go to the county planning department, as you'll have to, on the site plan approval, there's a good chance county planning department is going to say, we need a traffic light there. Whether the road has to be widened from, the road widening was measured from the Stedge driveway. Maybe based upon your volume, you don't need the road widened except from the entry point of that adjacent lot, if and when it's, and it would be fair for that developer to bear that cost. You can look at it in a number of ways, but the fact of the matter is that the sale to Stedge was a bargained for deal that took into consideration certain improvements that they didn't make. It also took into consideration certain improvements that they did make that they were only going to make 50% of, but when the town pool fell through, they opted to bear the cost 100%. So, they did some things, they didn't do other things. The pump station, sewer, some drainage. I think, if their numbers are to be believed, but I think they are.
It was a water line and a retaining wall, I think.
Yes.
How much were the improvements and how much were their obligations?
Well, yeah, it depends. The cost of those improvements may well have been between $1.5 and $2 million. When the town pool was on the table, all of those improvements, including the light, including the road widening, including the shared parking, were going to be shared with the town. Stedge chose poorly to go forward with their development and to incur those expenses without town contribution. So there's a lot of equities here. My only point is they are not likely to generate traffic that at the planning board level is going to justify imposing off-site improvements on them. But you can, because that's already been bargained with the existing owner.
Okay, so
At
my,
the risk of them deciding it's too expensive to do their purchase.
Andy,
And that's the,
Absolutely.
Can I
It's
speak?
entirely up.
sorry.
oh,
Go ahead,
it's
Paul.
okay.
My feeling is that this is a great project for the town, and we should do everything we could to lift the majority of the covenants and restrictions. And maybe there is a center point. I agree that they shouldn't have to widen the road, but I think the traffic light is pretty essential. That's a dangerous corner. So maybe that's part of the cost sharing. We could find a happy medium where they don't have to widen the
That's
road,
the
but we can keep the one restriction for the traffic light.
But here's in that context, just so you understand what was recommended and required, there's the road widening along Old Orangeburg Road. They're not burdening Old Orangeburg. But when you come and out onto the county road, the county is not just going to say, put a traffic light out there. They had stacking on Veterans, which meant the creation of a lane on the one or both sides to accommodate that stacking lane to make a left onto Old Orangeburg Road. It's not really just an issue of a traffic signal. It's the whole traffic circulation pattern at that intersection and what improvements have to be made.
You know what's ironic about that? The county itself on Blaisdell Road hasn't done anything in my tenure here on the town board in terms of making that safer. That one probably has more car crashes than the Hunt Road, right? And the county does nothing, zero, you know, so. Again, my concern here is all these covenants were in there. Again, I didn't realize it was 2005, I didn't know it was 2004, whatever it was. I say, all those covenants were in, but the project was never done. You know, I think it's more important that, you know, Tom Divney brought the New York Football Club to us and several years ago as a possibility. I guess he had talked to Tony. And to me, whatever I got to do to make this thing happen, I will do. And again, whatever legally, and again, that's why I'm depending on the town attorney, and the town attorney is right. You're saying, okay, listen, the decision is on our part, all right? You know, John gives us the different scenarios that we have to weigh, but I think we need to talk as a board.
Brian, when do you need to exercise your option by?
We have a decision point this Friday.
Okay, so maybe we should go into executive session and discuss this. Since it
Do
is a
that.
contract negotiation.
We could do that.
Motion for executive session to discuss this negotiation. Second. Paul, Valentine, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Folks, if we could restart the town board meeting, if someone could give a yell to Brian Quinn and the New York City football, there we go. We are no longer in executive session. Thank you for your patience.
Motion to re-enter the regular workshop.
Second on that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're back in regular session. So thank you, the town board just took a few minutes to talk with our attorney about some of the matters we're discussing here. And just to summarize what we really have already said, which is that we're really excited about the project proposal. It looks like a great development. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. And Stedge is a long time coming, so we're happy you're here. The board talked about whether or not we could vote tonight releasing some or all these covenants, and the sense is we just can't do that tonight, having a vote, that is, because it puts, you got to work with your attorney to put together the resolutions, and they're pretty specific. We also talked about the burden, the offsite improvements essentially, and we need to think about that a little more. So what we're going to do right now is decide to hold a special meeting on Thursday, probably at 12:30, but pending a schedule. We're setting it for 12:30 though. And so I'll make a motion to actually have a vote. This is a workshop meeting. We're not planning on voting on anything at workshop meetings, and I'm sure Brian's aware of that. When we do workshop meetings, we generally don't vote on things because we're setting the agenda up for next week. But I'll make a motion to set a special meeting of the town board for this coming Thursday at 12:30. Do I have a second? I have a second from Tom Divney. All in favor, say aye. So the main agenda item, perhaps the only one, will be further consideration of these questions related to the covenants and making sure that we have kind of determine what kind of action the town board can take on such short notice. So having said that, once again, say, you know, there's no doubt. I think you've heard us. You've heard from Tom Divney, Paul Valentine, Jerry, and Dennis that the project is, it's not just acceptable, it's exciting to see. Some of these matters need to be thought through a little bit, and I hope you weren't coming here tonight thinking you were going to get a vote on a workshop meeting on material that nobody had had a chance to see yet. So that wasn't your expectation. But we do want to work with you, and if we can get you more information after our Thursday meeting, then we're happy to do that.
You'd like us there for the Thursday meeting?
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Bruce told me he could be there, and I will move my
Thanks.
schedule around. I'll be there.
Thanks. Thank
12,
you, Brian.
12:30?
Right.
12:30 on Thursday. Okay, thank you. We appreciate your
All right,
consideration.
so that's that. Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
You too.
And welcome to Orangetown. So back to our regular agenda. This is a workshop agenda. We're reviewing items for decisions next week. Most of these matters are fairly routine, but nonetheless important. Number one is approving aid to the Dennis P. McHugh 12th Annual Run for Fun and Family Fair. Sorry, making sure my phone's not the one ringing. Are there any comments or need to discuss? This is from the Parks Department. They've got their paperwork in order. And we do it every year. And there's a number of, actually, I think I'm going to make a list of all the different fun runs and so on, because it's great. There's so many of them in town. And it's a fun way to go out and get some exercise. Number two is, this is related to the work needed over at the restaurant at the Blue Hill Golf Course, specifically related to the heating and air conditioning unit, which we've discussed before. We considered putting it in our bond, and we didn't. And the bid went out, and the responses came back, and Barry Burners of Nyack, New York, after review by the park superintendent, is the one to go with. And that's for $61,000. And it is timely, and Eric asked us to vote on it tonight, right? Yeah, just because. Yeah, it's just because the golf season will be underway pretty soon, and the decision, and then in a little time for the work to get done, and it's something this board should consider in terms of the timing on this. In terms of ordering the pieces and having them installed, and then having it ready for the season.
So we have got the emails on this, and I think the majority of the board felt the same way, so I'll make a motion that we go ahead and approve Barry Burners at $61,000.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks a lot. So that one's actually voted on, so that was an exception to my earlier statement saying we didn't need to vote on stuff. What's that, Divney?
Completely contradicts what you
That's true, because I forgot that was one that we had discussed and needed to be considered for early action. Plus, those guys already left anyway, so. Number three is the finance conference for, let's see, who's going to this? Our whole finance department, and going off to the conference. That's a good thing. Any discussion? None. Number four is certificate registration for sewer work, and there's two companies listed there. Number 5 and number 6 and 7 are all personnel matters related to the highway department and the roles of deputy superintendent and also recycling coordinator, and I think deputy recycling coordinator. And these are positions that come into play when the need arises. And Stefan Muno is here tonight. I know I talked to Jim Dean about these items, and he and other highway superintendents are on their way to Albany to lobby for funding in the state budget for road improvement. And so he offered his apologies not being able to be here, but if we have any questions, I'm sure Stefan can answer them. Does anybody have any questions about those positions? Okay, they're within the budget, and they're just in case you have deputies. Number 8 is the principal clerk typist in the police administration, and that's a reclassification that comes from the personnel department. And Donna is here if anybody has any questions. I think we've discussed this before, though, right? Yeah. And same goes for number 9. And so that was a short and sweet agenda. Is there any other business that the town board wants to discuss tonight? Anything, John, that you need? No? Department heads, anything? Eric, Stefan? No?
Eric and I met with Dennis Malone over at the town of Clarkstown a couple weeks ago. We met with Doug Schutz, am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah, the planning department?
Today, county planning. And we want to do a request for information regarding the possibility of the town of Orangetown running its own trips program, jitney service, so I'd like to vote on that next week, a request for information, because we did sit down with four members of the county planning board and Doug Schutz, and they said that that would be the start. You've got to do a request for information. They'll give us a plan as to what we need, the cost involved, and whether it is something that we want to follow through with or not. So let's.
Trips, isn't that a county service?
Well, it's what they do in Clarkstown. What is Clarkstown?
No.
Mini trans. All right.
That's
Mini,
different, that's different.
all
than
right, well,
trips.
the wrong name, but Clarkstown Mini Trans, Spring Valley Jitney, but,
After the county gets rid of them, they use them, but
yeah.
there's still a big difference.
No, well,
There's a big difference in cost.
well, that's why you have a request for information, Dennis, to find out what the costs are.
I get that.
Who are
Just
we requesting
call it whatever it
information
is,
from?
that's all.
We're-
It's a request, so the RFI would go out to, I guess, organizations that do consulting work for municipal transportation for programs like this. This is more just to identify those types of companies and what it would cost to have them actually come into Orangetown and do a study. I mean, they would need to come in here and actually look at the demographics of the town and
Whether,
what the need is for this type of, operation to take place, how the routes could be laid out. I mean,
lots of things.
There's a lot of moving parts to this, and sitting with the town today, I think, when we sat with Dennis a few weeks ago, he painted a pretty decent picture of what a program like this looks like, but sitting with the county today, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of certifications that are required, a lot of record keeping, administrative stuff. There's a lot of state and federal guidelines you have to follow to run a program like this. So it's a big deal.
as we know we want to look into it, they're going to center us on what we need to really know. You'd have to hire mechanics, you'd have to have bus drivers, you'd have federal and state requirements for those bus drivers. You'd need to hire someone to run the program. They can estimate how much money we'll get back from the federal government and how much we can expect in grants and how much we can expect in startup costs and how much, hopefully they can tell us how much it's going to cost the town to run such a service.
Can't we foil Clarkstown? Find out how much theirs cost
But
and how much they got back?
But the thing is, you have to be accepted into the program. Right now, they're putting out about $550,000. They run 5 routes. They do curbside to curbside. They do house to house. They do services for like senior groups. And the thing is, those are all going to be something that's going to be factored into what your costs are going to be. They're going to look at the needs of the community and tell us what works best for Orangetown, if it works for Orangetown at all. Because, as Dennis said, the TRIPS program, we've been told that Venture doesn't get service. the director says they have 3 or 4 buses that go to Venture every day. So he says they're also going to, with the state and the federal government, they're going to look at whether there is already a service that provides this and whether we should be doing like a duplicate service. So these are things that they would look at, but, you know, people have come to town hall and said they want this. The senior groups want this, and we're just trying to see if it's doable in the town of Orangetown. If it's not, it's not, but it's something that we should consider.
I think it's a great thing to find out about. And I guess, just so I understand, is it really a request for proposals, and then we would
Nope.
pay a consultant?
No.
So, it's just, right, but then what they would like would be a contract with the town to do a
Yeah.
consulting study to answer these questions. Right, okay.
Yeah.
To start the conversation with the consultant who, for a fee, does the analysis for
Well, the
you.
thing is,
Right, okay.
all right, so we'll draw. up
Maybe
some
we could have a
for-
presentation by one of the consultants or something.
Yeah, you just want to get it on the agenda.
All right, interesting. Thank you very much. Is there anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Also, turn the name of Lawrence Smith, longtime resident of very active in the Rotary. And
And Eileen next, did she use the room forward, or
so I didn't know, I knew her husband, I didn't know Eileen.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll adjourn our meeting tonight. Do you want to add those for next week, or you want to just adjourn and?
You can do it for next week. That's
Okay,
fine.
great. Motion to adjourn, do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it, thank you very much.